The Cowboy Next Door. Chapter 1. Wrong Turn, Right Place. The GPS had been lying for 11 miles. Lily Carter knew this because the paved road had become gravel 20 minutes ago. The gravel had become dirt 10 minutes ago. And the dirt had just become a muddy suggestion of a road that her little hatchback, a car designed for parallel parking in Manhattan, not for the great Texas wilderness, was currently sinking into with a slow, dignified inevitability that felt personal. She pressed the gas. The wheels spun. The car settled deeper. "Perfect," Lily said to no one. "This is perfect. This is great." She turned off the engine and sat for a moment, looking at the view through the windshield. Rolling hills going golden in the late afternoon light. A fence line of cedar posts stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere, a cattle egret lifted from a field and drifted white against the enormous Texas sky. It was, objectively, beautiful Texas sky. It was also the middle of nowhere. Her phone had 2 bars, and she had been driving for 18 hours from New York City, with a car packed so tightly with her belongings that she could only see out the rear window if she angled the mirror exactly right. She tried the gas one more time. The left rear tire made a sound like a disappointed sigh and sank another 2 inches. Lily dropped her forehead to the steering wheel. 6 weeks ago, she had been a senior wedding planner at a prestigious Manhattan firm. Then the firm had dissolved, dramatically, publicly, in the way that only things involving money and someone's husband and an embezzlement charge could dissolve. And she'd been unemployed. Then the letter had come from a lawyer in Silver Creek, Texas, informing her that her great-uncle Harold, whom she had visited exactly once as a child and remembered mostly for his hat collection, had left her his farmhouse and 12 acres of land. She'd taken it as a sign. Farmhouse and 12 standing sign, her friends had said. Lily had packed her car. She got out into the mud in her completely impractical ankle boots and pulled up the lawyer's number on her phone. She was trying to remember if he'd mentioned anything about road conditions when she heard it. The low, steady thrum of a truck engine. The truck that came around the curve in the road was large, dark blue, and unhurried in its movement, the way things are when they have never been in a hurry and don't intend to start. It slowed when the driver saw her car. Stopped. The man who got out was tall, genuinely tall, the kind that required recalibrating your sense of scale. Wearing worn jeans, a faded gray shirt, and a hat that looked like it had spent 20 years becoming the exact right shape. He walked toward her car with the loose, deliberate stride of someone who covered ground, as a matter of course, not effort. He looked at her car. He looked at the mud, not effort. He looked at her, in her city boots, standing in the road. He did not say anything. "Hi," Lily said. "I think I'm a little stuck." He looked at the car again. The left rear tire had now disappeared up to the wheel well. "More than a little," he said. His voice was low and unhurried, matching the truck. Dark eyes under the brim of the hat, expression giving away approximately nothing. He walked around the car once, hands in his pockets, making an assessment with the focused calm of a man who had seen stuck cars before and knew exactly what he thought of them. "You got a chain?" No, I'm sorry. I didn't think." "No," he agreed, without malice, and went back to his truck. He had a chain. He attached it to her car with the efficiency of someone performing a task he could do in his sleep, which he probably could, and hooked the other end to the hitch of his truck. And 10 minutes later, her car sat on solid road, mud-splattered and chastened. "Thank you," Lily said, with genuine feeling. "Thank you. Seriously, I don't know what I would have done. You're a lifesaver. Literally a lifesaver. Are you from around here? I'm looking for the Hargrove farmhouse, Harold Hargrove's place. I inherited it, actually, which is still a strange sentence. I only met Harold once, and he had the most incredible..." "Half-mile up, left at the water tower." He was unhooking the chain, coiling it with neat, practiced loops. "Stay on the road." "Right. Yes, of course." She paused. "I'm Lily Carter." He straightened, looked at her. Something moved in those dark eyes, brief as a cloud shadow. "Jake Walker," he said. "I own the ranch next to Hargrove's land." He picked up the chain. "Welcome to Silver Creek." It sounded, she would think later, less like a welcome and more like a warning. He got in his truck and drove away, and Lily stood in the road watching the taillights disappear around the curve and thought, well, that's going to be interesting. She was not wrong. Well. Chapter 2. Silver Creek and its opinions. The farmhouse was a disaster. A beautiful disaster. Lily was committed to that framing, with original wide plank floors and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides and windows that looked out over the hills in every direction. But the kitchen faucet dripped, the back door required a specific kind of coaxing to open, and there was a family of barn swallows who had established what appeared to be a multi-generational homestead in the eave above the porch steps and were not interested in negotiating. She loved it immediately and completely. She spent her first 3 days cleaning, making lists, and introducing herself to the town of Silver Creek with the natural enthusiasm of a person for whom talking to strangers had never been a difficulty. Silver Creek had a population of just over 2,000, a main street that took 4 minutes to walk end to end, a diner called Rosie's that served biscuits Lily became instantly devoted to, and the particular quality of small-town collective awareness that meant, by her second day, most people knew she'd arrived. At Rosie's, she met B, 62, retired schoolteacher, white hair braided back, currently the informal social secretary of Silver Creek, which was not an official position, but was clearly a real one. B brought her a second biscuit without being asked, and sat down across from her as if they were old friends who'd briefly lost track of each other. "Harold's girl," B said approvingly. "He talked about you sometimes, said you had good energy." "He barely knew me," Lily said. "Harold was a good judge quickly." B poured coffee. "How are you finding the house?" "It needs work. I'm making a list." "You'll need a contractor." "It needs work. Call Tommy Reeves. He's good and honest, which isn't always the same thing out here." B considered. "You've met Jake Walker yet?" The name landed with a specific weight. Lily kept her expression pleasant. "We met. Briefly. He pulled my car out of the mud." B's tone was the verbal equivalent of footnotes. "He's a good man. Private. Lost his fiancée some years back. Caroline. Car accident, she was 29. B paused, letting that settle. "He was a different person before. Did the rodeo circuit, laughed easy. Now he just..." She made a gesture that encompassed solitude and stubbornness in equal measure. "Keeps to himself. Keeps the ranch. That's his whole life." Lily thought of the dark eyes under the brim of the hat. The efficient silence. The way he'd looked at her car like he'd expected it to be foolish. He seemed like someone who had decided things, she said carefully. B gave her a look that was fond and shrewd at once. "That's a generous way to put it." Gave her a look that was fond. "The last 3 families who bought the Hargrove land, before it came back to Harold, he didn't speak to a single one of them for the length of their stay." She picked up her coffee. "You're the 4th. We'll see if you change his record." Lily looked out the diner window at the main street in the October sunshine, the feed store with its hand-painted sign, the hardware store with a dog sleeping on the step, the hills rising gold and green beyond the rooftops. "I've planned 214 weddings," she said. "I've negotiated between families who have been feuding for decades. I once got a mother of the bride and a mother of the groom to agree on centerpieces when they actively despised each other." She picked up her own coffee. I can handle one grumpy rancher. Bee smiled into her cup. That, she said, I would genuinely like to see. The next encounter happened 4 days later, and was, in Lily's opinion, entirely his fault. And 4 days later, she had been perfectly content exploring the boundary line between her property and Jake's ranch, simply walking and learning the land, when the fence post she'd leaned on to look at a hawk turned out to be rotten at the base. She caught herself before falling, which was good, but her sweater caught on the wire and tore, which was less good, and when she turned around, there was Jake Walker on horseback at the edge of his property, watching her with an expression she was beginning to suspect was simply his face. That post needs replacing, he said. Yes, Lily agreed. I noticed. I'll send someone. You don't have to do that. It's my fence. The post is on the property line. It's a shared fence. He looked at her torn sweater. You okay? Fine. I'm always fine. I'm a very fine person. She pushed her hair out of her face. The horse, a bay with a blaze, large and interested, was watching her with more apparent warmth than its rider. Your horse is very beautiful. Apparent warmth than it. The slightest thing happened to Jake Walker's expression. A softening so brief she almost missed it. Ranger? He said. He's 15. Hello, Ranger. Lily held out her hand, and Ranger dropped his nose into it without hesitation, breathing warm against her palm. She scratched between his nostrils, and Ranger leaned into it. She looked up at Jake, who was looking at his horse with an expression that was almost complicated. He's friendly. He likes people, Jake said. A pause. More than I do. Lily blinked, then she laughed, a real laugh, caught off guard. Did you just make a joke? He looked at her steadily. No. That was absolutely a joke. That was a self-aware, slightly self-deprecating joke. Jake Walker, you have hidden depths. Carter. He gathered the reins. Don't lean on old fence posts. Carter? She repeated. You called me Carter. It's your name. You remembered it. He looked at her for a moment with an expression she couldn't read. Remembered it. Then he turned Ranger and rode back toward his property with the easy authority of a man who had been on horseback long enough that it had become simply another way of moving through the world. Lily stood at the fence line with Ranger's warm breath still on her palm and the afternoon light turning everything amber and gold, and thought that grumpy was only one word for it. There were others underneath, she suspected. She had always been good at the underneath of things. She walked back to her farmhouse with her torn sweater and a strange feeling in her chest that she chose, for now, not to examine too closely. Chapter 3. The Festival Committee. Silver Creek's annual Harvest Festival was 6 weeks away, and Bee, who was also unofficially the festival committee chair, had found out about Lily's event planning background on approximately day 4 and had responded to this information with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been waiting for exactly this resource. With the quiet efficiency. I don't want to impose, Bee said at the diner over biscuits, in a tone that indicated the decision had already been made. Yes, you do, Lily said, and I genuinely don't mind. So she joined the festival committee, which met on Wednesday evenings in the back room of the hardware store, and which consisted of Bee, a rancher named Dale who had strong opinions about the chili competition, a florist named June who had gone to school with Bee and disagreed with her about almost everything except the fundamental necessity of the festival, and Tommy Reeves the contractor, who attended mostly because Bee asked him to, and he'd never worked out how to say no to Bee. They were delightful, and he'd never worked. Lily arrived at the second meeting with a detailed planning document and a spreadsheet, and the particular organized enthusiasm of a professional let off the leash, and within an hour she had a timeline, a vendor list, and a unanimous vote of confidence that involved Dale actually saying hot dog in a tone of sincere approbation. "Does the festival have anything to do with the rodeo?" Lily asked, because Bee had mentioned a rodeo in passing. "Last day of the festival," Dale said. "Silver Creek's had a local rodeo every October for 60 years. Just local riders, not professional. Well, except Jake Walker enters the roping competition sometimes. He was on the professional circuit for years before." Dale shook his head. "Boy could rope. Shame he quit." "He quit competing?" Lily asked, keeping her voice casual. "About 5 years ago," Bee said, watching Lily with her schoolteacher eyes. "After Caroline. He came back to the ranch and that was that." She paused. "He came back. He still enters the local rodeo, though. Just the one event, just once a year." Lily wrote rodeo logistics on her list and did not say anything else about Jake Walker, which she felt was admirably restrained. What she didn't tell the committee was that she'd seen Jake 3 times in the past week. Once at the hardware store, where they'd both reached for the same type of fence staple, and he'd stepped back and said, "Go ahead," with the same measured courtesy he seemed to extend to everyone. Not warmth, exactly, but a kind of fundamental decency. Once on the road, where he'd lifted 2 fingers from the steering wheel in the country road salute she'd been told everyone did out here, and which she'd been practicing in her own car alone. And once at the edge of the fence line, in the evening, where he'd been replacing the rotten post himself. Not sending someone himself. And she'd brought him a cup of coffee without thinking about it too hard. And he'd taken it with a look of such genuine surprise that she'd filed it away like something valuable. He'd said, "Thank you," and she'd said, "You're welcome." And they'd stood on opposite sides of the new post while the sun went down over his ranch and the smell of cedar and cattle and something that was just the land itself had come up in the cooling air. And it had been, somehow, a perfectly comfortable silence. She was thinking about that silence when she walked home from the committee meeting, the October evening star hanging low over Silver Creek, and thinking about it was getting to be a habit she noticed more than she wanted to. Chapter 4. The Storm. The weather forecast for Friday had said, "Chance of rain." The weather on Friday had interpreted this liberally to mean a wall of water moving across the Texas hill country with intent. Lily had been in town when it started, at the hardware store for paint samples, because she'd decided to repaint the porch, because the porch was the only thing currently standing between her and a longer list of more expensive repairs, and she needed a win. The rain came in from the west with the speed that Texas storms apparently specialized in, and by the time she got back to her car, the creek at the low end of her road had risen 6 inches. She drove carefully. She was being very careful. She had learned from the mud incident. She was halfway up her drive when she saw the fence. The storm had come through the north pasture, Jake's north pasture, which bordered her east field, and taken down a section of fence, and, from what she could see in the driving rain, one of the horses had gotten through the gap. Not Ranger. One of the horses, a smaller shape, moving in the wrong field, confused and skittish in the lightning. Lily stopped her car and got out into the rain without entirely deciding to. The foal was maybe 4 months old, a small gray-brown creature who had clearly made a series of poor decisions and knew it. Lily approached with her hands out and her voice low and steady. She'd read somewhere that horses responded to calm, and she was absolutely going to be calm, even though she was soaked through and could barely see through the rain, and the lightning was doing things she found medically inadvisable. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "Hi. You're okay. Look at you. You're so beautiful. You're fine. We're both fine. This is fine." "Carter," She spun around. Jake was 20 feet behind her, already in the field, rain-soaked but apparently unbothered by this, his hat doing its job with the reliability of something that had been tested before. He was carrying a lead rope and moving toward the foal with the focused steadiness of someone who did this in his sleep. "I saw her from the road," Lily said. "I was going to—" "I know." He wasn't looking at her. His whole attention was on the foal, voice dropping to something so low and calm it was almost below hearing, and the foal's ears came forward and her skittish backstepping slowed. "Easy, girl, easy." Lily watched him work. It was— she didn't have a better word than beautiful. The way he moved around the foal's fear, giving her room and then closing it slowly, patient as weather, until he could get the lead rope on, and the foal was pressing her nose against his chest, with the exhausted relief of a young animal that had decided someone was trustworthy. He looked up, found Lily watching. Something flickered in his expression. "She's okay," he said. "Good catch." "You did the catching." "You got her to stay." He looked at the foal. "She's one of the new ones." He keeps finding gaps. He ran a hand down the foal's neck. "She's persistent." "I like her," Lily said. The rain was letting up slightly, shifting from deluge to steady, and in the lesser din of it, she could hear herself thinking more clearly. She was standing in a muddy field in the rain, watching Jake Walker talk to a baby horse with the kind of gentleness he clearly rationed very carefully in all other situations, and something about it was making her chest do the complicated thing she kept telling herself not to examine. "Get out of the rain," he said, not looking at her. "I'm already wet." "Carter?" "You can call me Lily, you know." He looked at her then, rain on his hat brim, on his jaw, darkening his shirt. His expression was complicated in a way that she wasn't quite fast enough to unpack. "Get out of the rain," he said. "Please." She went, "Get out of the rain." But she looked back once, and he was still standing with the foal in the steadying rain, his hand on her neck, saying something she couldn't hear. She was warming up in her kitchen with dry clothes and a cup of tea when the knock came. Jake stood on her porch with the rain still falling soft behind him, his hat in his hand now for some reason. That small gesture of being somewhere not outside, she thought. "Come in," she said immediately. "I won't stay. I wanted to—" He stopped, started differently. "The fence section is down on a 40-foot run. I'll have it fixed by tomorrow. Tonight, I'll put Calla in the near pasture." "Calla?" Lily said. "The foal." She needed a name after today. Figured she earned it. Lily smiled before she could stop herself. "That's a nice name." Lily smiled. He was looking at her with that unreadable expression, hat in both hands, standing in the doorway between the porch and her kitchen, with the October night behind him and the kitchen light falling warm across his face. In her apartment in New York, nobody had ever looked quite so present in her doorway. Nobody had ever taken up quite that amount of space, physical and otherwise. "You were good out there," he said. With her, horses trust instinct. She saw something in you. She saw a soggy New Yorker talking too much. She saw something calm underneath it. He paused, and it was the pause of someone unaccustomed to saying the next thing. "You're good with them. You should come see the horses properly sometime, if you want." Lily looked at him, at the careful way he held himself, like someone who had extended something and was braced for it to be mishandled. "I'd like that," she said, keeping her voice easy. "Very much." He nodded once, put his hat back on. "Good night, Carter." He nodded once. She watched the porch light illuminate the rain behind him as he walked back toward his truck. The warm feeling in her chest was inconvenient and present, and she decided firmly that she would not think about it until tomorrow. She thought about it for the next 3 hours. Chapter 5. Walker Ranch. She went on a Tuesday. She told herself she was going because she'd said she would, and because she was genuinely interested in the horses, and not at all because she'd been looking for a reason. Jake met her at the main gate with the same low-key manner she was coming to understand as simply his natural register. Not unfriendly, not warm, existing in a careful middle space that she was increasingly convinced was a practiced thing rather than an inherent one. He showed her the barn with the focused thoroughness of someone who took the showing seriously, explaining each horse by name and nature, and she understood very quickly that the horses were the thing he talked about most easily, the place where the careful distance fell away and something real showed through. Ranger was 17 hands and had opinions. A gray mare named Lady had been with the ranch for 12 years and considered herself the authority. 3/4 horses in the south pasture were Jake's working horses, used daily, with the calm reliability of ranch veterans. And Calla, repaired to the near pasture, her fence gap mended, came to the rail when Jake appeared and accepted her name day as if she'd always known it was hers. "You run this alone?" Lily asked. They were leaning on the corral rail watching the horses in the afternoon light, and it was the first question she'd asked that wasn't directly about a horse. "Got 2 hands, part-time, Luis and his son, a horse. They're here most mornings." He looked at the pasture. "It's manageable. But you prefer it when they've gone." He looked at her. "Yes." "I don't think that's strange," she said. "I spent 10 years managing other people's most important days. Big, noisy, complicated days. There's something... I understand the appeal of quiet." She paused. "I never let myself be quiet enough in New York. There was always another event, another client, another crisis. I thought the noise was the point." She looked at the hills beyond the fence line. "Now I think I was just afraid of what I'd hear if I stopped." She hadn't meant to say that out loud. She glanced at Jake, who was looking at the horses with an expression that was attentive in a way that didn't require looking at her directly. "What do you hear?" he asked. She thought about it honestly. That I was doing other people's love stories instead of my own. That I'd convinced myself that was enough. She shrugged, lighter than she felt. That I'd convinced myself. Mildly inconvenient self-knowledge. "You're 32, he said. "That's early for self-knowledge. You sound like someone speaking from personal experience of discovering it late." His jaw shifted, not closing off exactly, more like acknowledging a fair point. "I spent 4 years on the road after Caroline," he said. It was the first time she'd heard him say the name. His voice stayed even, but the quality of the evenness changed, became deliberate. "Competing, winning, moving on before the next place could become a place I'd have to feel something about. I called it..." He stopped. "Living," Lily said quietly. "Yeah." He looked at her. It wasn't. She didn't say anything. The horses moved in the golden afternoon, and a hawk drew lazy circles above the south pasture, and Jake Walker stood beside her with the weight of his own history in the set of his shoulders, and she thought, for the first time clearly, without looking away from it, that she was in real trouble here. Clearly, not bad trouble, just the kind that changes things. "She would have hated me quiet," he said eventually. "Caroline, she had..." A pause that was almost fond. "She had this laugh. Everything was loud when she was in a room. She wanted to travel everywhere, do everything. The rodeo life, she loved it. The moving, the crowds." He turned a length of fence wire in his fingers. "I thought I was building toward something for us. The ranch. Coming back here eventually. I didn't know it would be..." He stopped. Without her, Lily said. Without her. They were quiet together. It was not an uncomfortable quiet. I'm sorry, Lily said. Not the reflexive kind, the real kind. I'm sorry you lost her, and I'm sorry you've been here with it for a long time. Jake looked at her with an expression that was unguarded in a way she suspected he rarely allowed. Thank you, he said, simply, seriously, the way he said everything. He said. Calla came to the rail and pushed her gray nose against Lily's shoulder, and Lily laughed, surprised, and Jake Walker looked at his foal and then at Lily, and his expression in that moment was something she filed away in the most careful part of herself. Chapter 6. What Everyone Saw. The town of Silver Creek saw it before either of them did, which was the privilege and occupation of small towns everywhere. Bea mentioned casually that Jake had stopped into the hardware store twice in a week and bought things he didn't seem to need. Dale observed that he'd seen Jake's truck parked on Hargrove Road, Lily's road, more than once. June the florist said, with the authority of someone who had grown up here, that Jake Walker had not willingly attended a community event in 3 years, and he'd shown up at the festival committee meeting last Wednesday, ostensibly to talk to Tommy about lumber, but had stayed for the full hour. Lily didn't know about most of this, but had stayed for. She was aware only of what was in front of her, that Jake had started appearing in ways that were practical and deniable, fixing a section of her roof when he'd come to check on Calla's fence and simply noticed, explaining, with the patient brevity of the very competent, how to winterize the pipes in an old farmhouse. Appearing on her porch one evening with a jar of honey from someone's bees up the road, and the information that it was customary to bring something when you'd been over 3 times. She had laughed at that. He had not laughed, technically, but the corner of his mouth had done the thing she'd catalogued. She'd started cataloging the corner of his mouth. This was information about herself she held at arm's length. The festival was 2 weeks away. The planning was going beautifully. Her professional instincts had clicked happily into the project, and the committee had taken to following her lead with the kind of trust that felt earned and warm. The town itself seemed to be rooting for the festival in the way it seemed to be rooting for various things Lily was involved in, with a warm, slightly nosy collective investment that she found charming rather than intrusive. She was happy, the specific, located kind of happy that she hadn't felt in years, rooted, not the buzzy anxiety of constant motion. The farmhouse was becoming hers. The land was becoming familiar. The hills changed color every day as October deepened, and she had started going out early to watch the sunrise over the east pasture, because the light at that hour was extraordinary, and she couldn't stop. She was happy, and she was not thinking about what would happen when she and Jake crossed the distance that was still, precisely, there. Then his grandmother arrived. Ruth Walker was 81, drove herself from Austin, and walked into Rosie's diner on a Thursday morning like a person who had earned the right to walk into things however she pleased. She had Jake's dark eyes and the manner of someone who had been watching human beings make predictable mistakes for 80 years and found it interesting rather than discouraging. She sat down at Lily's table without preamble. "You're Harold's girl?" she said. "Great niece," Lily confirmed. "Ruth Walker, Jake's my grandson." She picked up a menu she clearly didn't need. "He called me last Sunday. He calls me every Sunday, has since his parents moved to Scottsdale. Always tells me the same things. Ranch is good, horses are good, weather was this or that." She set the menu down. "Last Sunday he told me about the festival, the foal, and the farmhouse roof, and none of it was about the ranch." Lily felt warmth climb her neck. "He talks about the ranch to me too," she said. "I know what he sounds like when he's talking around something," Ruth said. "I knew it when he was 7 years old and pretending he hadn't broken the kitchen window. I knew it. She studied Lily with the frank appraisal of someone past the age of pretending not to assess. He hasn't called me with news in 5 years. Not real news, just status reports. She paused. Your real news? Lily looked at her coffee cup. I don't think I should be, she said carefully. I don't think he's ready for me to be. Ruth picked up her coffee. What do you think ready looks like? I don't know. Lily stopped. I don't want to be a project. Someone who fixes the sad widower next door by being cheerful at him until he thaws. I don't want to be his rehabilitation. I want to be... She stopped again. Chosen, Ruth said simply. Yes. Ruth looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, My grandson has been choosing you every day for 6 weeks. He just hasn't said it out loud yet. That boy communicates in actions, and he always has. She set down her cup. The question is whether you're paying attention to the right language. Lily thought about her roof. Whether you're paying attention to about honey and fence posts and a lead rope in a rainy field. About a foal named Calla and dark eyes in a doorway and the corner of a mouth that moved when she laughed. She thought she might be paying attention. She thought she might have been paying attention for a while. Chapter 7. The Misunderstanding. The festival arrived. It was beautiful. Lily's professional pride would not have permitted anything less. With hay bales and string lights and the smell of pie filling the main street and the chili competition in full chaotic swing by noon and music from a local band that had been playing Silver Creek events for 20 years. Children in cowboy hats ran between vendor stalls, and the October sky was the particular blue that happened when fall had firmly arrived and knew it. Jake came. He came without being asked, which Bea noted to Lily with precise significance. He ran the roping event set up with Dale, which was practical, but then he stayed. He walked the festival, Dale, which was practical. He talked to people. Not effortlessly, not the way Lily did, but with the deliberate investment of someone making an effort they'd decided was worth making. He found Lily by the pie-judging tent at 3 in the afternoon and stood beside her while they watched Dale accept his annual chili trophy with the slightly emperor-like dignity he brought to this event every year. This is good, Jake said, meaning the festival. It really is, Lily agreed. They were standing close, the comfortable close of people who had stopped tracking the distance. His arm was against hers, and neither of them moved away. The string lights were coming on as the afternoon went golden, and the band had shifted to something slower, and Lily thought, This is the thing I didn't know I was looking for. She turned to say something. She didn't know exactly what, something real, something that moved them forward, and saw his face change. He was looking at something across the festival. Saw his face change. She followed his gaze and saw a man she didn't recognize, talking to Bea, and Bea was gesturing toward Lily with the enthusiastic purposefulness that meant she was telling someone about her. Who is that? Lily asked. Tom Breckett, Jake said, and his voice had gone flat in a way she hadn't heard before. Real estate developer out of Austin. He's been trying to buy up land on the north side of the county for 2 years. A pause. Harold's land would have given him the parcel he needed for the development. He made offers. Harold refused everyone. The developer had spotted Lily now and was making his way over with the practiced warmth of a man who sold things. You knew about this? Lily asked. Knew he'd want to approach you. Figured it would happen eventually. Something in his jaw. Figured you should know before he got to you. When did you figure that? A pause. Bea told me when you first arrived that Breckett had been watching the property. Bea told me when you first... The warmth in Lily's chest did something complicated. So you knew when you helped me with the car. When you fixed my roof. Her voice stayed even. You knew someone was going to try to buy my property. He looked at her directly. Yes. And you were? She stopped. The developer had arrived. He introduced himself with professional friendliness, mentioned the development project, expressed sincere admiration for her renovation efforts, and then, yes, there it was, expressed interest in talking about the property whenever she was ready. She was pleasant. She was professional. She told him she wasn't selling, and he was gracious about it, and he left. Jake was waiting. Were you being friendly to me? Lily said, keeping her voice low and careful. Because you were protecting the property line? The question landed the way she knew it would, and she hated asking it. But she had to ask it. She couldn't not ask it. And she hated asking it. Jake looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Couldn't, for the first time, find the underneath of. No, he said. But you didn't tell me. For 6 weeks. I didn't think it was. He stopped. I didn't know how to say it without it sounding like you had a reason to be nice to me. Like I thought you couldn't handle your own business. He said it tightly. That wasn't what I was doing. Then what were you doing? He looked at her. He opened his mouth and closed it, and Jake Walker, who was not a man undone by words because he used so few of them, looked undone. I don't know how to do this, he said, and it was the most honest thing she'd ever heard him say, and it was exactly the wrong moment for it to break her heart. I'm going to go home, she said quietly. I need to think. I'm going to go home. She walked back through the festival, through the lights and the music and the smell of pie and the beautiful thing she'd helped build. And she felt the ground shifting underneath her in a way that had nothing to do with Texas soil. By Saturday morning, she was making decisions. The property wasn't going anywhere. The house was hers, the land was hers, and she was furious at Tom Breckett for nothing specific, and at Jake for the specific thing, and at herself, most of all, for having let the corner of a man's mouth become something she thought about. She'd told B she might go back to New York for a few weeks, just to think. B had looked at her with the schoolteacher eyes and said nothing for a long moment before saying very quietly, Are you sure that's thinking and not running? Lily had no good answer. She was in the house packing a bag, not leaving, just organizing, just doing something with her hands, when she heard the truck. Organizing. Chapter 8. Staying. She heard him on the porch steps before he knocked. She opened the door. Jake Walker was standing on her porch in the morning light with his hat in his hands. She'd learned this meant something, the hat off, held, and looking at her with the expression she had finally learned to read. Not unreadable, not guarded, just careful, the way you are with something important. I need to say something, he said. Jake, please. He said it plainly. She stopped. He looked at his hat for a moment and then back at her. When Harold died and I heard someone was inheriting the land, I thought, I was worried about development. Yes, that's true. The first time I helped you, the car, part of my mind was on the fence line. He paused. That's the last time any of it was about the fence line. I need you to know that. Lily was quiet. I haven't. He stopped, tried again. I haven't let anyone be important in 5 years. I didn't mean to let you be important. Anyone be important in 5. I didn't plan it. You showed up talking about nothing in the rain, and you brought me coffee, and you got into a foal's field in a thunderstorm for no reason, and you... He stopped again. I laughed at your jokes, Lily said softly. I make terrible jokes. You make exactly 2. They're both good. Something moved through his face, that almost smile she'd catalogued. Then it went serious again. I should have told you about Breckett. I thought I was protecting you, and I was actually just not talking, which is what I do, which is easier. He turned the hat brim in his hands. I'm asking you not to leave. Not yet. I'm asking you to... He looked at her. I'm asking you to let me try to say the things instead of just doing them. Lily looked at this man on her porch, at the hat in his hands and the morning light on his face, and 5 years of careful quiet wrapped around something that had been waiting, she now understood, for something worth opening for. Waiting? What would you say? She asked. If you said the things? He took a breath. That I've been next door to this property for 15 years, and I never once looked at it like I look at it now. That Calla tries to find gaps because she's persistent, and so are you, and I've spent 6 weeks being grateful for it. That I wake up in the morning, and I look out at your farmhouse, and He stopped. I feel something, for the first time in a long time. I feel something, and it doesn't hurt. That's new. He pressed his lips together. You make it not hurt. Lily felt tears prick the back of her eyes, unexpected, the kind that come from something being exactly true. You drive me absolutely crazy, she said. You know that, right? You talk in 2-word sentences and you appear in my life doing useful things, and you look at your foal like she hung the moon. She's a good foal. Jake. Sorry. She stepped out onto the porch. He went very still. I'm not going to New York, she said. Went very still. I was organizing a bag, not packing one. I was doing something with my hands because I was upset, not because I was actually leaving. She looked at him directly. I'm not running. I made a decision to be here, and I don't unmake decisions when they get hard. He looked at her with the most open expression she'd seen on him. All the careful distance she'd watched him maintain, laid down. I'm sorry, he said, for not telling you, for making you doubt. I know, she said. I know you are. She reached out and took the hat from his hands because he needed somewhere to put it, and she needed something to do. And she set it on the porch railing. And then she looked at him, and he looked at her. And the distance between them was down to something that was a choice rather than a gap. And the distance between... Jake Walker reached up and put his hand against her jaw, careful as he was with everything. And she leaned into it, and he kissed her in the morning light of her Texas porch, with the hills going gold behind him, and the barn swallows bickering in the eave overhead, and Calla visible across the fence line, nose down in the grass. It was a gentle kiss, unhurried, the kind that has been thinking about itself for a while. When they separated, his forehead touched hers, and she could feel the steadiness of him. The same thing the foal had felt, she thought, in the rain. Something fundamentally solid. For the record, he said quietly, Calla is a great foal, and she does hang the moon. Lily laughed, and it startled the barn swallows into the air, and Jake Walker watched her laugh with the expression she was going to spend a great deal of time looking at. Come inside, she said. I'll make coffee. He followed her in, picking up his hat from the rail as he went, and Silver Creek went about its Saturday morning around them, and it was ordinary and extraordinary in exactly equal measure. 3 weeks later, the rodeo was the last afternoon of the Harvest Festival, and Silver Creek turned out for it with the joyful seriousness that a 60-year tradition deserved. The arena behind the fairgrounds was packed, the smell of livestock and popcorn and October in the air. The announcer's voice, bright and carrying. Lily sat in the stands with Bea and Ruth. Jake's grandmother had come back for the festival, claiming she came every year, which Bea told Lily privately was not entirely true, and watched the afternoon events with the warm, located feeling she had now come to think of as simply life in Silver Creek. She and Jake had spent 3 weeks being deliberate. Not careful in the old way, the careful of distance. Deliberate in the way of two people who had decided to go toward something and meant to do it right. He cooked. She baked, badly, which he observed with the dry affection she had learned was the shape of his humor. They rode together on Saturdays, her on Lady, who tolerated newcomers with dignified patience, and talked about everything and nothing in the easy way of people whose silences had started to feel like conversation. She was happy. The rooted kind, the located kind, the kind with his truck on her road, and his name in her phone, and his hat on her porch rail when he came in for coffee. The roping event came in the late afternoon, when the October sun was going amber and long, and Jake rode out on Ranger with the easy authority of someone returning to something familiar. The crowd recognized him. She heard his name pass through the stands with warmth and a specific interest that said they'd been watching him rebuild too, and a specific interest the whole town had been watching. He was extraordinary. She could see, in the fluid precision of the way he worked, the man who had done this at a professional level. The focus, the economy of motion, the particular communication between rider and horse. Ranger moved like he was thinking ahead of Jake's body, and maybe he was, after 15 years together. He won. Easily, cleanly, without apparent effort. When he came out of the arena, he came to where she was standing at the rail, and he looked at her with those dark eyes that she could read now like she read the land, the hills, the light, the weather that moved across them. He dismounted and handed Ranger's reins to Luis, and he took off his hat, and he turned to her. And the whole arena seemed to have arrived at a pause in the way that arenas do when something outside the scheduled program is happening. "I had a speech," he said. "I've been working on it for 2 weeks." "You wrote a speech?" Lily said. "In words?" "Several whole sentences." He reached into his vest pocket. "Then I decided I was better at showing than telling anyway." He opened his hand. The ring was simple, a slender band with a single stone, not large, warm as amber in the late afternoon light. She looked at it and felt the world reorganize itself quietly around this moment. "I know what I'm like," Jake said. "I know I'm not easy, and I'm not loud, and I'm better with horses than conversations, and I'm offering you a life that is—" He paused. "Smaller than what you came from. But it's real. The land is real, the ranch is real, and what I feel for you is—" He looked at her with the open expression she'd first seen on her porch 3 weeks ago. "It's the realest thing I've got." The arena had gone quiet the way arenas do. Not actually quiet, children still crying somewhere, cattle somewhere, the sounds of a working festival. But quiet in the sense of collective attention held. "Lily Carter," Jake said, "will you stay?" Held. "Not just for the farmhouse. For me." Lily looked at this man who had pulled her car out of the mud and taught her about her land, and named a foal in a rainstorm, and showed up on her porch with his hat in his hands to say the things. She thought about Agnes and her wedding planner's knowledge of what love looked like when it was real. She thought about her own farmhouse with its bad faucet, and its perfect porch, and its view of the hills that changed every day. She thought, I have been looking for a love story I could believe in. I have been standing in one for months. Yes, she said. Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring on her finger with hands that were steady and warm, and then he stood up and kissed her in front of Silver Creek and the rodeo and 60 years of tradition and all the watching eyes that had seen this coming before they did. And the crowd did what crowds do when something true happens in front of them. B made a sound of profound vindication in front of them. Ruth Walker said nothing. which for Ruth Walker was everything. Ranger, tethered nearby, tossed his head in what Lily chose to interpret as approval. 2 whole sentences, Jake murmured against her hair when the noise had settled. That was basically a monologue for me. You were very eloquent. I practiced on Ranger. How many times? 9. A pause. He's a good listener. Lily laughed, and the barn swallows rose from somewhere, and the Texas afternoon held them in its amber October light, and the town of Silver Creek went on around them. Ordinary, extraordinary, exactly the right place. Epilogue. April spring came to Silver Creek with the particular exuberance of places that have waited for it through honest winters. Lily's farmhouse had its porch freshly painted, deep green, which she'd decided on after considerable deliberation, and Jake's studied neutrality. That meant he liked it, but wasn't going to say so. Jake's studied neutrality. The barn swallows were back, unbothered by the paint, reclaiming their eve with proprietary confidence. The farmhouse and the Walker Ranch existed in easy proximity across the fence line. The same fence line that had started everything, now mended and sound. The shared post between them solid as intention. Calla was 6 months old and deeply opinionated. She had decided Lily was hers in particular, and came to the fence rail every morning while Lily drank her coffee on the porch, and this had become one of Lily's favorite things. The foal's earnest gray face in the early light, Jake's ranch visible beyond her, the hills going green with spring. She was planning a wedding, hers. For September, in Silver Creek, in the open field behind the farmhouse where the hills were visible in every direction. She was doing it herself, which was both professional pride and something more. The pleasure of putting everything she'd learned into the thing that mattered most. Bee had opinions. She'd learned into the thing that June the florist had opinions. Dale had opinions about the catering that were very specific and not entirely wrong. Jake had no opinions about the wedding because he had exactly one opinion. Yes, whenever. Whatever you want. Which Lily found both unhelpful and deeply charming. You're supposed to have preferences, she told him. It's your wedding, too. I prefer you, he said. That covers most of it. He was on the porch steps, mug in hand, watching Calla watch Lily with the fond attention of a man who had gotten very comfortable on this particular porch over the past months. He had not moved in. There were proprieties, and there was her independence, both of which they respected. But his truck was on her road most evenings, and his coffee mug had a place on her shelf, and these things were the shape of what they were building. September, he said. September. She looked at him over her own mug. 6 months. That's enough time, he said, for the planning. It's also enough time, she said, to not drive me crazy about the catering. The corner of his mouth moved. Dale's chili, he said. Absolutely not. It's local tradition. Jake. I'm just saying. Lily pointed at him, fighting her own smile, and he looked at her over his mug with those dark eyes that she had been reading for 6 months now. Every page familiar, still finding new things. And the morning light came across the hills, and Calla pushed her nose through the fence rail, and the new green of the Texas spring moved in the soft April wind. She had driven here running away. She had found something she hadn't known she was looking for in the mud of a country road, and a reserved man with a hat and a lead rope and exactly the right kind of patience. She was a wedding planner who had planned 215 weddings. The last one, the one that mattered most, was a September morning in the Texas hills with the man next door, who had pulled her out of the mud and changed her life, and named a foal for her, and loved her in the most deliberate, wholehearted way she'd ever had the privilege of being loved. Silver Creek, she thought, looking at the morning. Home. End.